What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another special video, as I've been tagged in another challenge that's going around the movie community on YouTube. And these are the top 10 movie moments that made me go wow. These are moments that have either shocked me, left me in awe, or moments that I find to just be pure movie magic. This one was a little hard, as I've seen a ton of movies and I had to rack my brain as to which ones I really wanted to go with, whether it be for a major plot twist or an emotional high point, or just a little moment that really stood out to me. I'm not even entirely sure if these are the 10 for me, because there are just that many I had to choose from, but I think these 10 will be the most fun for me to talk about. Before we begin, I want to thank Sean from Lost in the Reel for tagging me in this challenge. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. He's a great guy and he's been incredibly supportive of my channel, so I can't thank him enough. Definitely go support him and subscribe. And stick around till the end, as afterwards I'll be tagging 5 other channels to take on this challenge. One other thing, this video will be timestamped, as I do get into spoilers for most of the movies I talk about on here, including the ending for several of them. So I'll introduce which movie I'm discussing, and if you haven't seen it and wish to know nothing, you can skip to the next one. But let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about my top 10 wow movie moments. At number 10, we're talking about Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So I'll let you in on a little secret. Planet of the Apes is one of my favorite movie franchises of all time. Between the original series, the newer trilogy, and I even have a soft spot for the Tim Burton movie, even though it has its problems. Now, I know for the original series, anything past the first film is considered very hit and miss, with this movie in particular being considered a major step down from the first. And look, yeah, it is. I don't think it's god-awful or anything, but that's a story for another day. This isn't so much about me defending the movie as a whole, but rather just to talk about the ending. Truthfully, the first movie, which is one of my all-time favorites, has by far the better ending, as well as a number of moments that were easily worthy for inclusion on this list. The reason I'm talking about this ending in particular, though, is because I saw it growing up, and it was the first time I was exposed to an ending where everyone dies.
I shot someone at the pillar!
Not only that, it's the fact that you had the sequel to what was a huge hit at the box office and had so much franchise potential, and you literally end the movie with killing everyone off. Now, that did get retconned just a bit with the third movie, but at the time, that wasn't known, and the idea was to end the franchise with this movie. Basically, to make this quick, the film follows an astronaut named Brent, who's searching for the protagonist of the first film, Taylor, and lands on the Planet of the Apes. He eventually finds Taylor, along with a group of mutated humans who worship a giant doomsday bomb hidden underground. And when the apes find the mutants and a fight breaks out, most of the main characters are shot and killed, and Taylor, in his dying moments, launches the bomb and kills everyone else and destroys the planet.
Help me! You asked me to help you? Man is evil, capable of nothing but destruction.
The scene then whites out, and we get a brief voiceover, and the movie ends. It's really bleak stuff. And while I know this isn't the first movie that had an ending like this, it's the very first time I was exposed to an ending like this. And needless to say, it messed me up at the time, because I didn't think we could have movie endings like this. So it always stuck with me as a result. Now, it's low on this list just because of how it's still a downer ending and because the movie itself has issues as a whole. But it's one of the first times I saw how pessimistic a movie ending can be.
In one of the countless billions of galaxies in the universe lies a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead.
Wow.
At number 9, it's a moment from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, a movie I've been wanting to talk about on here for quite some time, as it's one of my favorite movies of all time. If you're not familiar with it, it revolves around a group of strangers who stop to help a criminal who crashed his car on the highway, and with his dying breath, he tells them about a stash of money he buried, and it turns into a race to see who can get there first.
Look, there's this dough, see? There's all this dough. 350 G's. Do you hear what I'm saying? 350 G's.
Now, if you've seen the 2001 comedy Rat Race, this might sound a little familiar to you, as that movie, while not a remake, was heavily inspired by this. Now, this is the movie I can go on about, and I plan on that one day, but the moment I specifically wanted to include basically encapsulates the entire film's charm. The movie's a ridiculous comedy, but it was shot in the style of a trend that was big in the 1960s, which was the epic movie, being long in length and grand in scale. And like those epic films at the time, there'd be a break in the middle for an intermission, similar to a night out for live theater. And prior to that happening in this film, we get a 5-minute montage of each of our characters, all split up in all these different directions, all at the height of whatever conflict they're in. 2 of them are trapped in the basement trying to put out a fire, 2 are losing their minds in an out-of-control plane they can't land, other characters are seen getting into physical altercations with each other, among a few other things. And we cut back and forth between all these moments, set to a very lively tune by composer Ernest Gold, and it's almost as if the conflict is moving to the rhythm of the music, with even some moments acting as if they're responding to the previous scene.
What did you do to my mom?
And things get worse and worse as everyone reaches their boiling point, with the screaming getting louder, with the background noise getting louder, but before it cuts to intermission where we don't see the conflicts resolved, it ends on a shot of a speechless Spencer Tracy, who's playing the detective monitoring everyone, about to snap as he's dealing with his own dilemma of listening to his wife and daughter shouting at each other over separate phones. And part of his arc was the fact that his day was starting off very good, and it's going just about as out of control as the people looking for the money. Now, I'm really not doing this moment justice by just explaining it, but it's a sequence that plays out like it could have been the end of your movie, yet it's only the halfway point, and it's just a great way of showing heightening in a movie and making something feel epic, yet doing it with what's honestly a silly movie. And it's just a great example of showing how you can leave your audience with wanting more, and the audience is rewarded with an even bigger payoff in the film's second half. So this moment, and the way it was brilliantly executed, was one that I always appreciated.
Melville, I smell something burning.
Oh, be on fire!
At number 8, we're talking about Whiplash, easily one of my favorite movies of the last decade, and one that blew me away when I saw it in theaters. What starts off as what seems like a simple drama about a student wanting to excel at the drums turns into an intense psychological thriller where his instructor hurls non-stop abuse towards him and the rest of the students, and he pushes himself to his absolute limit as he struggles to keep up and be the absolute best.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Rushing or dragging?
Rushing.
So you do know the difference.
While the whole movie has moments worthy of this list, the moment I specifically wanted to talk about comes around the halfway point, where Andrew, Miles Teller's character, has to rent a car while running late to an important competition, and he accidentally forgets his drumsticks at the rental office. After Fletcher, J.K. Simmons' character, threatens to bench him, Andrew rushes back to the rental office to get the drumsticks, but then his car crashes on the way back. This moment totally caught me off guard, because as intense as the movie's been up until this point, this throws a perfectly timed curveball into the mix to completely up the stakes. And it's executed in such a brilliant way, as for the previous few minutes, you're already on the edge of your seat from the series of explosive arguments between Andrew, Fletcher, and one of his bandmates, and you're initially suspecting the moment's simply going to climax with just another series of shouting matches. And this is just a great example of a brilliant plot twist, where the movie perfectly pulls the rug right from under your feet, and it's not done just to shock you, because the film goes on there, and the way it does becomes integral to the rest of the conflict, and it was done so well, with Andrew escaping the car, rushing back to the competition totally bloodied up, and then getting into a fistfight with Fletcher after he tells him to get off the stage. It's especially surprising considering this was a moment you thought was totally going to change the pacing of the film, and it still pushes through and keeps going, and I highly respect it for that. And when I saw this in theaters, the fact it's silenced, an absolutely packed and up until this point lively audience, outside of some brief audible gasps when it first happened, still sends chills up my spine.
Neiman. You're done.
Wow. right?
Great, thanks.
Amazing.
At number 7, we're discussing Stalag 17, a 1953 war dramedy from one of my favorite directors, Billy Wilder, about a group of American soldiers in World War II held at a POW camp trying to seek out an informant among their crew. While this movie's just tense as a whole, the moment in particular I want to talk about is the big reveal at the end of the film. So for much of the runtime, the group suspects a cynical prisoner named Sefton, played flawlessly by William Holden, as being the informant, as he's seen openly cutting deals with the guards for food and other small favors, and he often tells the rest of the crew that escape is pointless. Now, while Holden's top billed here, the first part of the film is not really through his point of view, though that starts to shift as he reaches a breaking point and he becomes determined to find the informant himself, and we watch him pick up on little things in the camp that raise his suspicion, which themselves were worthy enough to be included here. He eventually deduces it's the security chief, Price, played by Peter Graves, and in a pivotal moment where the crew's attempting to help another prisoner escape, he exposes him to everyone.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
No, I don't sprechen Sie Deutsch.
Maybe just one word? Kaput? Because you're kaput, Price.
Will you get this guy out of my hair so I can go?
Go where? To the commandant's office and tell him where Dunbar is?
Why, I'll kill you for that.
Shut up.
Now, while this is your typical trope seen in a lot of movies, especially older movies, where the big bad guy's plan is all revealed in one swoop, it's still done in a very entertaining manner, especially as Holden commands the screen with his interrogations in front of everyone and gets Price to trip up on very oddly specific information. On top of that, the film doesn't dive into cheesy territory for this last stretch, because for much of the film, Sefton and the rest of the crew outright hate each other, but that doesn't suddenly change just because he figures out who is the informant. While he offers to help the other prisoner escape and uses Price as a decoy to distract the guards, he makes it clear that this doesn't suddenly mean they're all friends, and he leaves with everyone on terms of mutual respect, but still a clear dislike for one another. I'd say it's a very subversive moment for a 1950s movie, because on top of an entertaining reveal, it's a rare instance where everyone just doesn't come together as friends and their personalities suddenly change or anything. Which, as much as I like a lot of older films from that time, you did see stuff like that pop up pretty regularly. It's just a brilliantly executed moment that I always found to be riveting.
Just one more word. If I ever run into any of you bums on a street corner, just let's pretend we never met before.
Wow.
At number 6, it's a moment from The Sting, one of my favorite movies of the 1970s. For those who don't know what this is about, the film stars Robert Redford as a con man named Johnny Hooker, whose partner is killed by a ruthless crime boss named Doyle Lonigan, played by Robert Shaw, who they unknowingly ripped off at the beginning of the film. And not being a killer himself, Hooker instead enlists the help of a fellow con man named Henry Gondorff, played by Paul Newman, to get even by conning Lonigan out of a large chunk of his money. Set in the 1930s, the film's a fast-paced caper with plenty of tributes to the golden age of filmmaking. It's admittedly a very layered and intricate plot, and one that's also extremely dialogue-heavy and requires your full attention. Though to be clear, it's also not convoluted or impossible to follow. And if you're able to keep up with it, it's a very rewarding experience. While there are a number of riveting twists and turns here, the moment I wanted to talk about specifically is once again the ending. So throughout the movie, while Hooker and Gondorff are setting up their con, there's a subplot where Hooker's picked up by a police lieutenant who's been following him since the beginning of the film, and he's handed over to the FBI, who force him to betray Gondorff. And it all culminates at the end of the movie when the FBI busts in on the middle of the con, and it ends with a shootout between Gondorff, Hooker, and the FBI. Or so it seems. After Lonigan's escorted away from the crime scene without recovering his lost money, it's revealed the shootout was fake and the FBI agents were all fellow con men working with the crew, running their own con on the cop following Hooker the entire time. The thing is, this was all unknown to the audience as well, meaning they were also tricked the way our antagonists were, resulting in one of the most intricate yet very rewarding plot twists of all time. It's a moment that manages to be riveting and jaw-dropping, and as it's revealed at the exact moment that our heroes all won, it becomes a very satisfying experience. And because of the nature of the twist and just how complex the movie was up until this point to begin with, it's still 100% believable, if a bit complicated when getting there. And while a plot twist can be difficult to pull off, as it does risk straining credibility credibility, this does so with what seems like ease.
It's a nice con, Hickey. I thought you were the feds myself when you came in.
No trouble, Henry. Snyder went for it all the way.
Oh, man, I feel like, wow.
At number 5, it's a moment from Jurassic Park, a movie that hopefully needs no introduction. I've talked about this movie briefly in my favorite movie from each genre tag video, and I even alluded to the moment I'm about to discuss in that video. While I'm sure many people usually cite the T-Rex scene, or the Velociraptor kitchen scene, or the Dennis Nedry escape scene as a big wow moment, and to be clear, they are, I'm going to go with easily the film's nicest moment. And that's when Doctors Grant, Sattler, and Malcolm all first arrive at the park, and as they're looking around in awe and trying to take everything in, John Hammond utters the movie's most famous line,
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
and then John Williams' masterful score just overtakes the scene as we cut to a wide shot of all the dinosaurs that can possibly be crammed into one shot. It's a moment that always gave me goosebumps between Richard Attenborough's delivery, the satisfaction of seeing our protagonist take it all in, the beautiful camera work, and the score all working in tandem with one another. It's a simple moment, but it gets me every time. While this is at the beginning of the movie and things go way downhill for our heroes, it's just a nice scene that symbolizes hopefulness and optimism, even if it's only for a very brief second. I mean, not just within the context of the movie itself, but with just anything you do, if you think about it. Not that I think this scene was created as a metaphor or anything, but just seeing that mix of satisfaction and shock from our characters, that the impossible was made possible. It's something we can all relate to when we accomplish something big that we thought was difficult, or if we overcame a huge obstacle. That same feeling is captured perfectly in the execution of this scene, and that's what makes it so relatable. Even though it's a movie about dinosaurs, I can still watch this scene, and I never cease to be amazed by it.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Wow. At number 4, it's a moment from Avengers Endgame, another movie that I don't think needs much of an introduction, considering it held the title of highest grossing movie of all time for 2 years. The buildup of 22 movies, all very intricately connected in one way or the other. This entire film is noted for being a very satisfying conclusion to all that buildup, undoing the damage done by Thanos at the end of Infinity War, and also being non-stop fan service for literally 3 hours, while still telling a compelling story. As for the moment I'm going to choose, like with these other movies, there are a number of sequences that I could have gone with. The obvious choice would be to go with what's arguably the film's most iconic moment, and that's the on your left scene when all the dead heroes are seen for the first time since coming back to life, rushing to the aid of our protagonist.
On your left.
And while that is a beautiful moment, there's one other one that gets me just a little more, and it's one that's easily the film's most overlooked moment, at least based on what I've seen. It's the scene where Scott Lang, after being released from the Quantum Realm, is walking around town and knowing something happened, yet unsure what it was exactly. And in a panic, he goes to find his daughter to make sure she's okay. And when they see each other, it's just this beautifully subtle moment where she's crying tears of joy, thinking he's been dead for 5 years, and he's hugging her, and he's happy, relieved, but also horribly confused all at the same time, especially since he's now seeing her all grown up. And he's feeling such a wide range of emotions that all he's able to get out is a very choked up,
"You're so big."
It's a beautiful moment that represents what I look for in movies, because I want to feel a wide range of emotions when watching a film, and this manages to make us feel so much in just one brilliantly subtle instance, especially because that's how both of these characters feel, not knowing what to properly express. On top of the fact that it's relatable, with just the relief of seeing a loved one for the first time in such a long time. So, for all the big spectacles, riveting moments, gripping action scenes, and laugh out loud moments in this movie, I will defend this as literally the most well-acted moment in the entire film, and it takes my breath away every time I rewatch it.
Oh, hi, is anyone home? This is Scott Lang. We met a few years ago at the airport.
Yeah,
Wow.
At number 3, it's a moment from 12 Angry Men, another movie I mentioned in my previous tag video. And I didn't want to repeat too many of those films as I already mentioned Jurassic Park, but I couldn't leave this one out either. For those who aren't aware of the story, it's about 12 jurors for a murder trial discussing the case in question. And while it seems obvious to 11 of the jurors that the young man in question is guilty, one of them, played by Henry Fonda, votes not guilty and insists they at least dive deeper into the case, thinking there's some room for doubt. And the rest of the film is him convincing the others that there's more than meets the eye. It's a brilliant story because it's not your typical good versus evil story. There's conflict, and there are clear protagonists and antagonists, but no one here is an outright bad person. There are those who are openly adversarial, sure, and one in particular says a lot of ignorant things, but at the end of the day, it's about 12 people who do want to do the right thing, but with some more misguided than others due to personal biases or clouded judgment. And that notion that they're not bad people is perfectly captured in one of the film's final moments. After the last juror, played by Lee J. Cobb, breaks down in tears, angered by how his own son hurt him, which blinded his judgment throughout the entire movie, he buries his head in the table and says,
No. Not guilty. Not guilty.
And after everyone else leaves the room to deliver the verdict, it's just him and Fonda left, with the two of them having gone at each other's throats for the entire film. Yet, in a simple act of kindness, Fonda comes over and helps the dejected Cobb put his jacket on. It's an incredibly powerful scene that manages to say so much without the characters having to say anything at all, because it shows at the end of the day, despite all their differences and despite how aggressive they were towards each other, they're just people with their own troubles and their own stories to tell. And it captures how we've probably been in a situation like that at one point or another, where our own personal baggage might have clouded our judgment, or maybe we saw someone else that's affected by something tragic in their personal lives, and maybe they don't realize how bad it's affecting them. It's a perfect depiction of how the world can be a beautiful place, but one that's also deeply complicated at the same time. And again, it just hits so many emotions in one brief scene.
Rotten kids, you work your life out!
Wow. At number 2, it's from Inglourious Basterds, Quentin Tarantino's revisionist war drama that tells a much different story of how World War II went down. So, Tarantino is my favorite director of all time. While not all of his movies are perfect, they all offer some sort of unique experience, each taking a creative spin on different genres. And what he's especially known for is how he can take stories where not all that much happens at times and make them seem 100 times more interesting due to the way he meticulously builds up tension all through dialogue, something that's not always easy to pull off, but he does so seamlessly. And that's done a number of times in this film, but my absolute favorite instance is the bar scene halfway through the movie. In this scene, a German-speaking British officer, played by Michael Fassbender, along with two members of the Bastards, disguise themselves as Nazi officers to rendezvous with a double agent, played by Diane Kruger, so they can infiltrate a German movie premiere. They meet at a bar that they thought was going to be empty, only to find a number of German soldiers there already, celebrating the birth of one of their kids. And things get very tense when a few of them pick up on Fassbender's unusual accent. The scene as a whole is the definition of an emotional roller coaster, as it's 20 minutes in this bar of the Bastards doing their best to get the Germans away from them without raising any suspicion, with so many ups and downs, including getting rid of one officer only for another to sit down and interrogate them, and the conversation flows from laid back to aggressive to on the edge of your seat, as you can't tell if he completely sees past them and is toying with them, or if he might actually be fooled. And when you're about to breathe that sigh of relief at the end, as he's about to leave, Fassbender accidentally gives himself away with a subtle hand gesture.
Weil Sie sich eben verraten haben, Hauptstummführer. Sie sind so deutsch wie dieser Scotch.
And all that build-up pays off with a giant shootout taking place, killing nearly everyone in the bar. This is what makes Tarantino both such an excellent director and an excellent writer in my eyes. The way he manages to toy with your emotions all through dialogue and build up that tension through little subtle phrases or gestures is something I find has gone close to unmatched, especially as he always finds a new way to pull it off. And even if you find his dialogue-driven sequences to go on too long at times. The thing is, in almost every instance, he rewards you for being patient, and it's something that leaves me in awe every time.
There's a special rung in hell reserved for people who waste good scotch. Seeing as I may be rapping on the door momentarily. I must say, damn good stuff, sir.
Wow, look at this. But my number one wow movie moment is from Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino once again. I initially didn't want to double up on the same filmmaker, but I couldn't leave this one out because Pulp Fiction is my favorite movie of all time. Plus, when you have a clear favorite filmmaker, it's hard to pick out just one moment from one movie. For Pulp Fiction, I specifically wanted to talk about the ending. The two hitmen played by Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta are sitting in a diner after a very long morning, only for the diner to be held up by two thieves, played by Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer. At the beginning of the movie, Jackson was all in on his life of crime, as we see him famously recite a Bible passage before killing his target. Yet after experiencing what he sees as a moment of divine intervention, where a bunch of point-blank gunshots somehow miss him, he decides to give that life of crime up once he gets back to his boss after they eat, only for things to get complicated by the robbery. So after getting the upper hand on Roth, he recites that passage one more time to him, but this time tells him of the new meaning it has for him, and how he now wants to use it as a way to be on the right path.
The truth is, you're the weak, and I am the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
And it ends on this optimistic note as he lets them go and he and Travolta exit the diner, and there's this very cheery, lively music playing in the background as the movie ends. The thing is, while this concludes the movie, it's not the end chronologically, as this actually happens earlier than a number of other sequences that we saw earlier that also includes Travolta getting killed off halfway through the movie. When you place everything in chronological order, main characters are dead, others experience drug overdoses, others have been tortured, and relationships have been permanently fractured. Yet Samuel L. Jackson is one of the few exceptions here, seemingly exiting his life of crime at the right time and getting an actual happy ending. And with the film being presented out of order, it allows it to end on an optimistic note, almost tricking us into believing the film itself actually has some sort of happy ending. And while this isn't the first movie to tell a story out of chronological order, it was the first one I can remember seeing that was told in such a manner, and it blew me away how Tarantino took a story that had all these horrible things happen and make it end on a seemingly high note by taking the middle of the movie and placing it at the end and making it seem like the actual ending. It works so well. Pulp Fiction is the movie that inspired me to want to study film. It's the film that had me aspire to be a filmmaker at one point, and it's the film that made me see filmmaking and storytelling in a whole new light. It's a movie that I'll always have a special place for, and it has my number one biggest wow movie moment of all time.
I think we should be leaving now.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Wow. And that's that. What a list. Again, this was kind of difficult to narrow down after the top few choices, but it was a lot of fun to do. But now that we've gotten through the list, it's time to tag 5 other channels. I'm going to tag Rio's Positive POV, Rhapsody Reviews, Luke Herefield, Zach Goller, and Let's Crash This Parade. I'll leave a link to all their channels in the description. Go check them out and describe them. They're all great. And if you don't want to do this and you heard your name, don't feel obligated to. It's all meant to be fun. Also, if you were already tagged, then ignore this. I know I was a little late to this because I was tagged like 2 weeks ago prior to filming this video. It's just been hectic. So sorry for the delay and the double tag if that happened. But I hope to see your lists if you decide to do this. But for everyone else, let me know. Did you see all the movies on this list? Do you plan on checking out the ones you haven't seen yet? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.